I'm getting married in 2 weeks, and I'm freaking out. I need to get this off my chest. I feel like I'm going crazy. My fiancée Sarah and I have known each other for about 6 years. We're getting married in just 2 weeks, and I just witnessed something that is making me feel like I am making the biggest mistake in my life. Tonight, Sarah and I were taking a rare opportunity to relax at home. Sarah was in the kitchen making. I was working on one of my projects in the backyard, so I went out back to get a drink. When I came back to the house, I saw Sarah at the counter, making dinner and talking on the phone. I recognized the voice as my brother-in-law Marty. Marty asked Sarah where her sister Evelyn was because he'd been trying to get in touch with her. She's not answering her texts, and I hear Sarah tell him she just left. She should be home in about half an hour or so. I should mention that Evelyn is Marty's wife of 5 years. I have to admit that I didn't immediately register what she had just said because I went into the kitchen and grabbed a glass. I asked Sarah what was going on, and she said Marty was looking for Evie. I see her texting, so I ask her what she's doing. She says, "I'm texting Evie." Marty was looking for her anyway. I pour myself a drink, sit down, take a sip, and finally my brain starts to work. First, I heard Sarah tell Marty that Evelyn was here. Evelyn was not here, and the last time we saw her was yesterday when she came over to work on some last-minute wedding decorations with Sarah. Second, why is she texting Evelyn and expecting a response when I distinctly heard Marty say that Evelyn wasn't answering her text? Why on earth would she tell Marty that Evelyn should be back in 30 minutes unless she either knows where she is or she is right now in front of me texting her to tell her to get her but home quickly? The only conclusion I came up with is that Sarah is lying to Marty about the whereabouts of her sister. He probably warned Evie that Marty will expect her home in half an hour. I then spent probably the next 5 hours I spent the next few hours coming up with various explanations for Sarah's behavior, some decent and some downright horrible. I really wanted to ask her about this, but at the same time, if I was right about what was going on, I doubted I'd get a straight answer. That brings me to about an hour ago. I woke up around 1 a.m. to use the bathroom, and I couldn't resist checking Sarah's phone. We both know each other's pins. It wasn't a difficult thing to do. I grabbed the phone, went to the bathroom, and unlocked it. As I suspected, it was what I was afraid of and probably what most of you were expecting. Sarah's sister, Evelyn, has been having an affair with a coworker for about 6 months, and Sarah has been helping Evelyn cover it up for almost that entire time. There are literally hundreds of texts between them discussing it, discussing the coworker, and discussing sex. My brother-in-law has been involved in some pretty embarrassing situations, and my future wife has been aware of them all along. I took screenshots of the evidence and returned the phone to its original location. I then went to my home office to write this account so I could calm down before I have a complete meltdown. I'm completely shocked and upset. I can't marry Sarah. I just can't do it. I can't think of any reasonable excuse she could offer me about assisting her sister in this affair and victimizing not only Marty but also their 2-year-old daughter. On the other hand, my family, Sarah, and her family have all sunk a lot of money into a wedding that is supposed to happen in around 2 weeks. There's no way we're getting any of that money back. I feel like an idiot. How did I not know this woman was like this? What am I going to do? Can't marry her. I absolutely cannot, however, I still want to. She's beautiful, fun, and kind. I thought we had a bright future ahead of us. She's never done anything wrong to me, but I just can't see her the same way now. It's like a big black stain on an otherwise beautiful picture. I just don't know. I really messed up. I know I have to do what I said I would, but I'm dreading it. I feel like I want to throw up or break something. Guys, you don't have to convince me not to marry Sarah. It's obvious the wedding is off. I'm just trying to figure out my next steps and work up the nerve to do it. There's a lot of pressure on me from everyone, but I am not going to let this get to me. I just don't want to have to deal with the fallout. I'm also pretty angry that I'm in this situation. It's 5 a.m. I have work in 3 hours and I'm running on a couple hours of sleep. I'm going to take a shower and head into work a little early to avoid Sarah and stew on this. Thanks to the supportive people here, and a big thank you to those who keep saying I should figure out whatever good reason my soon-to-be ex-fiancé had for this. I appreciate the advice, but I've already done that. I got into work around 7. No one was in the office, so I decided to start pulling off the band-aid. I called my brother. He lives in Australia, so he was still up after having just put his kids to bed. It was hard breaking the news to him because I know he has laid out a huge amount. He didn't mention it once, even though he's an older brother and I'm sure he could have. He made a great point, too. He said that I work with liars and scammers, and I don't blame you for wanting to leave that behind. He was totally right about that, and I get why I'm reacting so strongly. He also had a great idea about Sarah's participation in this deceit. He was going to take his family down to Florida to do some sightseeing and visit the parks. Well, now the kids will be accompanied by their uncle as well. It should be easy since we were going to honeymoon there as well, and we were planning on meeting them for a bit anyway. I'll just do everything to be closer to him and his family. I'll get Sarah a ticket to either my sister or another family member. I haven't had time to read everyone's comments, but I've answered a few right now. I'm just sort of making myself sick by drinking cup after cup of coffee and trying to distract myself until the day gets one enough where I can reach out to Marty. Edit 4 just did morning stand-up. My stomach is doing flip-flops from drinking about 2 pots of coffee since I got in here so early. I'm having trouble focusing and concentrating. I feel like I can't do anything until I tell Marty what I know. So I'm taking a sick day and driving over to his house to see if he's around. If not, I'll call him and track him down. Marty is on break and Evelyn works a 9 to 5 like me, so there's a good chance this will work out. Wish me luck. Edit 5. Got to his house a little after 10 a.m. He'd just put his daughter down for a nap. So we had a long talk in the kitchen. Basically, he'd suspected this for a couple of months. But Evelyn had been good at covering her tracks. She'd obviously had help from Sarah and a couple of their mutual friends. I don't have all 6 months of text messages. Just a couple of dozen screenshots I sent to myself from Sarah's phone. I gave him what I have and I offered to help however I could. I'm a field analyst in the CU department of a mid-sized insurer specializing in workers' compensation fraud, so I know a few things and a few people. I'm now working from my laptop and my almost brother-in-law's kitchen trying to salvage whatever I can. I'm going to have to talk to Sarah this evening and get the word out as fast as I can to my friends and family now that I know I won. I didn't screw Marty over. I managed to get most of the honeymoon back, although I had a problem with the ticket because Sarah was flying under her maiden name, and our carrier has a rule about name changes. They let me cancel and get a partial refund and rebook to my sister, who will be accompanying her 2 brothers and nieces to Florida in a couple of weeks. I'm waiting to cancel the venues until after I talk to Sarah. I'm not going to tip anyone off until Marty gets his chance to confront Evelyn, but I will definitely be letting my family and friends know this afternoon and asking them to keep it on the down low. I'm basically in a frenzy right now, canceling stuff I can cancel. I'm heading down to the bank in a few to open a new account and get my bills in order. Some people have mentioned them, but it should be pretty good. The mortgage isn't one of them. My name is on the account since we weren't married, and I have the higher income. However, Sarah contributed about $20,000 versus my $60,000 towards the down payment. I'll probably have to pay her that money and some portion of the mortgage payments for the last 16 months, but it could be worse. I'm writing this from my buddy's house. It's about 8:30 p.m. right now. My name is Mark, and I worked with him in the same field. I work as a field analyst in the CU department of a decent-sized insurance carrier. For those who don't know, that means I'm basically a private detective. My job is to investigate what we think might be fraudulent claims in regards to workers' compensation. Anyway, as I kind of hinted at, Marty asked for my help in finding out who the other guy was. That Evelyn was cheating on him with all we had to go on was a name? Let's call him Jake. The first thing I did was not do some major amount of sleuthing. I basically just went through LinkedIn trying to find the guy through Evelyn's connections, but that brought up nothing, which I thought was strange. Marty had told me that Evelyn was supposed to go out for drinks tonight after work, and that she said she wouldn't be home until around 9 or 10. He didn't have to tell me what he suspected since I pretty much understood right away. I told him that I would help him, but he needed to come with me. I then contacted my colleague Mark and explained the situation to him. He agreed to meet us later in the day. The first thing we did was drive over to Marty's parents' house so that they could watch their granddaughter. I don't know what Marty told them as I waited in the car after that. We went to Evelyn's office. It's in one of those big commercial strip malls with all these nondescript offices in a row in a big non-gated car park. We drove around until we found Evelyn's car, and then I had Marty unlock it with the second set of keys. I then gave Marty a voice-activated recorder and a GPS tracker to place in the car. Once we were done with that, we left the car parked a bit down the street, and I waited for my friend to arrive and for Evelyn to leave the business. Mark showed up about 20 minutes later and hopped in the car with us. After about an hour, Evelyn came out of her office with two of her girlfriends and a tall, younger-looking man with sandy blonde hair. They were obviously holding hands, and I thought, Evelyn, you're making it easy for me. I took a couple of pictures from the car and then waited for Evelyn to leave in hers and mine. I started tracking her. At first, I thought she might go right to a hotel, but she didn't. Instead, she drove to a nice bar and grill in a nice section of town and parked on the street. I drove by her as she was getting out of her car and entering the establishment. Then I found my own parking spot and went over the plan. We sent Mark in since no one knew him. He had basically two jobs. First, he tried to get any comp pictures he could have. Jake and I waited in the car for about 20 minutes until I got the first text from Mark. It was a series of pictures of Evelyn and Jake making out in front of their two female coworkers. Marty was right. They were helping Evelyn hide the affair from him. He was obviously upset and angry. One of the coworkers is married, and Marty and Evelyn are good friends with them. Both of them have toddlers around the same age, so I asked Marty if that's enough for him. He says he still really wants to know who this guy is. I try to tell him that we can find out later, but he's practically begging me at this point, so I tell him to wait. I text Mark that I'm coming in, and then I go into the bar. The first thing I see is Evelyn and her crew, laughing and drinking at one of those tall round tables near the front. As I enter, I stop for a moment, pretend to be surprised, and then call out to Evelyn. Hi, what are you doing here? She's obviously shocked to see me, and everyone around her tenses up immediately. Evelyn quickly introduces me as her sister's fiancée and says that we are getting married in 2 weeks. There are a lot of congratulations from everyone, so I thank them and then stick out my hand to the blonde guy and introduce myself with my full name, hoping that he'll respond in kind. I'm a bit surprised when he responds in kind. He's not named Jake. I introduce myself to everyone else and then tell Evelyn that I'm here to meet a coworker. I wave to Mark and then excuse myself. Once I get over to Mark, I tell him the guy's name. We both whip out our phones and look him up. It doesn't take long for us to find him. He's got social media profiles and a couple of court cases. We find out that Jake is his middle name, and everything falls into place. I'm just grateful that Evelyn isn't cheating on Marty with two different coworkers. Turns out, Jake is 26, married, and has a 1-year-old daughter. This just keeps getting better. I text Marty the guy's name and decide to push my luck and tell him to wait a few more minutes. Basically, I'm playing babysitter here at the bar. I'm totally visible to Evelyn and her crew. I can see out of the corner of my eye that no one is particularly happy about this, and my presence is really ruining the night. This is good. I let this go on for about 10 minutes and then tell Marty to text Evelyn that he's spending the night at his parents' house with their daughter. It doesn't take long after that until I catch Evelyn taking out her phone. I show it to Jake and then everyone decides to pack up. Evelyn comes over to me, says good night, and asks me if Sarah and I want to come over for dinner this weekend. I smile and say that sounds like a great idea and wish her and her coworkers a good night. Mark and I wait for them to leave, then pay our bill and hurry back to the waiting Marty. There's a bit of hesitation here because we don't know exactly what Evelyn was going to do. I thought she might have already booked a hotel room and was heading there, which would have made things a lot more complicated and limited what I could do. But it turns out that tonight was probably just drinks at the bar. It wasn't until Marty decided to spend the night at his parents' that it turned into something more. Evelyn made a beeline for home, and we followed behind her, way out of sight, and parked down the street. It didn't take long after that until the car pulled into Marty's driveway, and we saw Jake get out, go up to the door, knock, and be greeted by Evelyn. They went inside together. It's now about 7:30, and I have my own stuff to do tonight. I think that's a friend. I've done pretty much all I can do for Marty, and he can handle the rest himself. I feel bad for the guy, but I don't want to get more involved in this. I don't want to get more involved in this than I already am. Being the wingman for him while he confronts his cheating wife is a bit much for me, given my situation. Marty says it's fine that he'll do the rest of it himself. He's more of a man than you thought, Evelyn. He goes to Evelyn's car, retrieves my gear, and we bid each other goodbye. That was almost 2 hours ago. I did get one text message from Marty saying it was done and he was going to his parents' house for real this time. He's gone to his parents' house for real this time, but my phone hasn't been blowing up, so I don't know what's been going on with Evelyn. I've been at Mark's since then. That basically wraps up my account of what happened. Marty, if he'd been smart and listened to my advice, he'd have been recording with his phone when he entered the house. I'll find out later anyway. My top priority now is to head home and tell Sarah that the wedding is off. I think it's pretty clear that she's going to take it badly. I mean, there's just no way she won't. Like I said, I just can't get married to her right now. I don't know what the future holds for us or if we'll be done with each other or not. But one thing is for sure, we're not getting married anytime soon. And to those who keep asking why I didn't talk to her first or why I didn't confront her, I have to say, are you people stupid? She was stone cold and lied to her brother-in-law, who she'd known for about 10 years, about how great he is as a husband and father. Maybe you're naive enough to think someone can lie that coldly to someone they're close to and then tell the truth, but I'm not wired that way. Until that moment, I'd never had cause to doubt Sarah or not trust her. But she was literally she was acting trustworthy in front of me, and I was supposed to let it slide or expect her to be honest with me. I guess you don't know what it's like to have your entire view of someone shift in an instant. It's disorienting and a bit panic-inducing. I'm actually impressed I kept my head and followed my instincts instead of pressing her right away because it led me to the truth. It would have been ridiculously easy for her to lie. If she'd deleted those text messages, I never would have read the horrible things she said, seen how she can be so duplicitous and two-faced, or realized how little I actually knew about her. I'm going home to talk to Sarah. I'll update later to let everyone know what the final verdict is. Here's another update for you guys. There's a lot to go over. A lot has happened recently. Most of it, if I'm being honest, hasn't been that great. In fact, it's been pretty bad. But I'll get to that later. First, I left Mark's house pretty late that night. Sarah already knew I was out discussing business with him. She had no idea that the business was actually her sister's affair. Still, it was getting to an unreasonable hour. I was trying to get up the nerve to go home. After 2 or 3 pep talks from Mark, I finally mustered up the courage to go home. I texted Sarah I was coming, and I left in my car. As I said in the last update, I was pretty surprised when I got there because when I walked into the house, Evelyn was crying on the couch with Sarah. I hadn't seen Evelyn's car in the driveway when I came home, so this was probably the last thing I was expecting. I froze for a moment and almost turned around. I left, not expecting this. I knew Evelyn's presence would make a bad situation worse, but I had a schedule to stick to. I had to let my friends know and cancel wedding preparations. I had to move on. When I walked in, Sarah and Evelyn looked up, but Evelyn didn't start her tirade of accusations. I just stared back, raising my eyes in question. The moment passed, and Evelyn went back to crying, Sarah back to comforting, and I let it awkwardly hang in the air for half a minute while I thought Marty hadn't mentioned my assistance in uncovering Evelyn's affair. I decided to play dumb, not for any reason other than I wanted to see how Sarah reacted. I took a seat on a recliner, put down my laptop bag, and took my phone out of my pocket. I made it look like I was fidgeting with it. I asked them what was going on. Evelyn just kept crying, but Sarah looked at me and said, Marty is divorcing Evie. I already had a feeling that was the case. I decided to ask her directly, why? Sarah stopped patting Evelyn's back for a moment and looked at me. I could almost see her face twist and contort. It was like the look a 5-year-old makes when you tell them to eat their broccoli or finish their lima beans. Evelyn shot Sarah I didn't need to be a sister to understand. There was a pregnant pause until Sarah finally said she cheated on him. I have to admit this response floored me. It wasn't what I was expecting. The more cynical readers here might think, well, the cat was out of the bag, so there's no point in hiding it. And yes, that's true. But it's also true that she could have just as easily feigned ignorance or even worded it another way. If I'm understanding this correctly, Marty accused Evie of cheating instead of basically confirming it to my face. I know I'm being a bit pedantic here, but it's part of my job to pay attention to not only what people say but how they say it. Evelyn wasn't happy about this. She kind of crumpled into the couch a bit and did this strange combination of a sigh and a sob at the same time. I wanted to press on and ask her more, but I must have stammered. I stammered a bit. Sarah probably interpreted my shock, but she was only partly right. Did you know Sarah didn't say anything? She just nodded her head and kept rubbing her sister's shoulder. I didn't hesitate and asked for the obvious follow-up. How long had it been going on? The answer came back a lot easier than I thought it would. 6 months. I was shocked by how easily she admitted to it. Evelyn was shocked as well. She smacked her sister's hand off her and mine. I think even Sarah was a little shocked at saying it out loud. I leaned back in the recliner, took a moment to collect myself, and tugged the rest of that Band-Aid off. We're not getting married. There were 2 looks like stunned goats and a chorus of "What?" from both sisters. I stood up and repeated myself. We're not getting married. I can't marry someone who would cover up adultery, especially not for 6 months. Sarah sprang off the couch and opened her arms. The body language was clear. Couldn't believe it. I put my hands up to block my face. I'm serious. I don't like this. Not one bit. I don't like that you took part in this. I can't get married to you with how I feel. It would be a mistake. But I started crying immediately. Even Evelyn did that thing with her mouth that looks like a perch trying to suck air. There were wails from Sarah's accusations of not loving her. Appeals to my sense of duty to the loss. The money, the hassle for all our friends, the embarrassment. I'd already thought about all that. But hearing Sarah say it in that intense way, with those intense sobs, it felt different. I probably made a big mistake, but I don't know how long Marty would have kept me off the books. So I said, "Look, I've already canceled the honeymoon." It's not. I knew it was a bad idea the second I said it. It had an immediate impact. Evelyn, to her credit, had always been pretty quick on the uptake, which is probably how she had managed to fool her husband for so long. I could almost see the realization dawning on her when she put it all together with my appearance at the bar earlier in the evening. She screamed, "You son of a..." and flew across the room at me. Now, I'm not a huge guy, but I am not a small guy, but the force with which Evelyn flung herself at me had me staggering backwards. I barely had enough time to get my hands up before she started raking my face with her fingernails. I almost lost the phone I still had in my hand, but I managed to push her away and say very loudly, "Evelyn, get off me. Sarah, get your sister under control." Evelyn made another lunge for me, but surprisingly, Sarah did exactly what I asked her to, engulfing her arms around her. I grabbed my sister's waist and held her in place. I looked at Evelyn and yelled, "Get out of here right now, or I am calling the police." I held my phone up for emphasis. Sarah asked both of us to calm down. She said to me, "Oh, she doesn't have anywhere to go right now." And Marty took her car keys. That explained the lack of a car in the driveway, but I didn't care. I was 100% through with Evelyn, and I was going to make sure she knew it. I marched into my home office and locked the door and called the police. I told them I had been attacked by my fiancée's sister and had locked myself in my office. I was bleeding from my face. Evelyn had scratched me pretty good along the inside of my left eye, and my vision was blurry. I was afraid for my life. I even told them that I had recorded the entire altercation on my phone, just as I was finishing up my conversation. Sarah came knocking on the door. "Opie, please come out. We need to talk about this. I love you. Don't do this. We don't need to do this. Even Evelyn is sorry. She wants to apologize. I'm pretty sure that last one was a lie." But Sarah was obviously losing her cool. I didn't answer her. In her attempts to get me to come out of the office, she probably ended up leaving right when the police showed up at our front door. I could hear Sarah talking to them, and I decided to when I came out. There were 2 cops. One of them looked younger than me, maybe around Sarah's age, and the other one looked older and more annoyed. I introduced myself and pointed at Evelyn, saying she attacked me. I offered to show the cops the recording I made. The younger cop asked me if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. He asked me again and I said yes. At this point, both cops looked at each other. Before the young cop could open his mouth again, I said yes again. I repeated, yes, I want to press charges. I have video evidence and this is going to court. Otherwise, I'll call your boss and ask him to come down and do it himself. They seemed surprised that I knew his name. Not that we're friends, but given my line of work, I spend plenty of time interacting with local law enforcement. I've met most of the higher-ups or spoken with them on the phone a couple of times in the last few years. Over the past few years, I've found myself getting increasingly frustrated. I understand the officer's perspective, but I don't agree with their actions. Even though I wasn't seriously injured, I was assaulted in my own home, and I wanted her gone. Thankfully, the situation didn't escalate immediately, and the officers handcuffed Evelyn and took her to the back of the patrol car. She was screaming and crying like a child. The guy was a real maniac the whole time. Sarah wasn't much better. She just kept going, "No, please no," over and over again. At this point, the younger cop came back and asked us if everything was okay. I just told them I was going to bed. He asked Sarah again, but she didn't answer right away. So he said, "Is everything okay here, ma'am?" It was clear what he was fishing for. I really disliked this guy, but I bit my lip. Sarah finally realized that the cop was addressing her, and she just nodded at him. Obviously, he wasn't satisfied, so he started asking her again. At this point, I interjected and said, "If you want to go on a fishing expedition, you might want to do it over there on the lawn where my doorbell camera isn't recording you." I think I had pushed my luck with this guy one too many times, but what could I do? I think I was probably about 30 seconds from getting the cuffs slapped on me. The cop was talking to her, and she just nodded at him. Clearly, he wasn't satisfied, so he started asking her again. I interrupted and said, "If you want to go on a fishing expedition, you might want to do it over there on the lawn where my doorbell camera isn't recording you." I think I'd pushed my luck with this guy too much, but what could I do? I think I was probably about 30 seconds from getting cuffed. He kept on until his partner came up and basically pulled him away. He was an older man, probably in his late 50s, and probably didn't want to process 2 arrests right at the beginning of his shift, especially when one of them was obviously going to be more trouble than it was worth. I'm pretty sure he talked him out of it, and they left, carrying Evelyn away. Hopefully, that's the last I'll see of her. At this point, I'm thinking about whether I want to stay here or not. The fact that my parents live a couple of hours away and the thought of how poor I was going to be in the short term ruled out their place or a hotel. I decided to sleep in the guest room. Sarah tried to get me to engage with her in conversation or to sleep in our bed, but I told her we'd talk tomorrow. I was tired and didn't want to be disturbed. Thankfully, she let me. I crashed hard, harder than I had in years. That pretty much brings us up to speed with the last update. But dear friends of Reddit, let me tell you this. The next day was by far the weirdest day of my life. To start with, I woke up at 11 a.m. Sarah was still home. She had cleaned the house from top to bottom. The floor sparkled, the toilet shined, and I could lick the linoleum in the bathroom. She probably smelled great. She had obviously been busy, but when she saw me, she sort of hovered out of immediate range. Not quite engaging, but looking like she wanted to say something. I get it. Last night was traumatic for everyone, and she was probably uncertain. Did I just cancel the wedding? In the heat of the moment, was I serious? Was I really angry? I took a deep breath and told her we needed to finish talking. She tried to sit next to me on the couch, but I told her I needed space. I thought about putting her off, but I didn't. We weren't getting married, but I didn't need to act like I hated her. In fact, I didn't. I was just disappointed and a bit disgusted by some of the things I'd read in her text messages. We were both hurting, and I didn't want to make it any worse or make things more complicated than they already were. Took a while. I had to do a bit more convincing for Sarah to truly and fully believe the wedding was off. She wasn't taking it well, to say the least. I think she was hyperventilating a few times. I was holding it together better, but obviously not. This was my idea, and I'd had longer to come to terms with it. Finally, she asked the serious question, "What about us?" I know I'm going to get a lot of hate from people for this, especially the kind, I know some Redditors think every infraction in a relationship is grounds for ending it. In fact, I could even say that my calling off the wedding was like dropping a Moab on our 6-year partnership. But the truth is, I didn't have an answer for Sarah. I just didn't know what to do. So I told her that I had read all those text messages and it showed me a side of her that I didn't know existed. I told her I wasn't sure about our relationship anymore. I said I couldn't understand why she would go along with Evelyn putting down Marty and joining in, and even egging her on and cheating on him and their daughter. She just kept saying, I know. It was wrong. I know. I asked her for an explanation, but she couldn't provide one. She just said that she got carried away and that she had to choose her sister. I told her that I thought a good sister was someone who kept you on the straight and narrow and didn't give you a free pass to be a jerk. She agreed with me and said that she would do better, but that Evelyn had always been the boss when they were kids and she was always the follower. I get it. I have an older sibling too, and while I'm a bit more independent, I also spent the last 18 years of my life with him living on the other side of the planet, except for the odd occasional visit around Thanksgiving or Christmas, but I still had an advantage over Sarah because my older sibling was a decent guy while Evelyn was not. Now, here's where I got the second major shock of my life in like 48 hours. Sarah said to me, "It's not fair. It's not fair." I asked her, "What's not fair?" She said, "You were sexting that bimbo wife Mandy girl on Instagram last year." I said, "I got over it. I was really hurt, but I got over it. Why can't you get over this? I don't understand why she's bringing this up. Who is this bimbo wife, Mandy? I have no idea." I asked her if she was high or having a psychotic break. I realized that was mean, but I have absolutely not been doing cybersex or sexting with anyone, especially not some Instagram girl. I'm protesting pretty loudly at this point, and she started yelling at me through her tears, saying she saw the messages last year and decided not to confront me because I'd stopped. She said she'd been checking my socials from her home computer when I'm at work. I have only family and a couple of work friends on there, so that should have been easy to verify. I tried to make this case to her, offering to let her log into all my accounts and check for herself. She just called me a liar and a pervert. She starts throwing stuff at me, and things are getting out of hand. I tell her that if she throws one more thing, I'll have her taken out of this house, just like her sister. She swears at me and storms off to the master bedroom and slams the door. I'm so confused. I head into my office, fire up my desktop, and type, "Bimbo wife Mandy." I searched on Google and found an Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit account. There were also a lot of fans. I clicked on one of the Instagram links and saw a post of a very busty woman who seemed to be pushing the limits of science and technology. She was from Australia, just like my brother. Do you remember all the nice things I was saying about him? Well, guess who was staying with us last Christmas? It was my brother all the way from Australia. I told him to use my office computer to play games if you have jet lag. As far as I can tell, my brother logged into Ether after his wife and kids went to sleep. He was probably paying money to sext with this girl. What a great guy. I would love to call my brother and confirm my suspicions, but it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. I'll have to wait until tomorrow. I'm pacing back and forth, trying to figure out how I feel about everything. I feel totally let down by everyone. For a brief moment, I try to connect the dots between whatever Sarah saw my brother do and what she did with Evelyn. But try as I might, it doesn't really come together. Maybe she's a more tolerant or forgiving person than I am, which is why she didn't confront me. If she'd seen this, I wish she had. It would have given me a chance to tell her my personal stance on these things and show her how I'd act. It might have influenced her in a good way later on, or maybe it wouldn't have mattered. I don't know. All I know is that this post is becoming a novel, and I've wasted most of the morning when I should be working to get this out of my head and onto paper. I feel better for having done it, but there are probably another 2 or 3 posts left to tell. I'm not going to post them to this subreddit anymore. I'm not sure they'd let me, but I will try to quietly update my profile in the next day or 2 with the rest of the story. I'll talk about what I said to my brother, my parents, and Sarah's parents, and finally where Sarah and I stand. One thing I can say, though, is that my immediate family relationships are pretty strained, for various reasons. My parents are mostly supportive, but that's changing now that they're facing the financial loss. The marriage is still off, which was pretty much a certainty from the beginning. Sarah's parents are upset, and I'm sure they're having a hard time right now. For those wondering, Evelyn is no longer. While she was in jail, she got Sarah to bail her out. I even told Sarah she was her sister's underling, which I think really resonated with her. She wrote me a 20-page letter about how her sister always bossed her around. I've read it twice now, and I wish we had talked about this at any point over the last 6 years. Maybe things would be different. I don't know. Anyway, read it here. If anyone's still interested, I'll be posting the final chapter of the saga in about a day or two, and I might do a follow-up after the former wedding day passes. I'll also be mentioning Boafindi in the comments. 081023. Update. August 10th, 2023. I've been meaning to get this update out for a while, but things have been pretty hectic lately. There's been a lot going on, and I just haven't had the time. I finally had some free time after lunch today to get this out. I'll try to get through as much as I can before I have to leave for the day. I just want to mention a couple of things in response to comments from the last post. I'll try to be brief. Firstly, I don't know much about what's going on with Marty and his divorce. As far as I know, he's still divorcing her. Obviously, there are no papers. I'm not in a position to advise Marty on what he should do or offer him legal counsel. I'm not here to track down his wife or anything like that. Marty is an adult and he can handle the situation however he wants. As his friend, I'm here to support him and offer advice if he asks for it. Secondly, this isn't some sort of guerrilla marketing for an OnlyFans girl. If it was, I should have done it on the first post, which hit the front page of Reddit and was seen by over 3 million people. Also, given that this post got so popular on Reddit, it's not really a surprise that Mandy, another Redditor, happened to be following the story and saw her name. It could have easily been any other of the hundreds and hundreds of girls who use Reddit to post their pictures. As a side note, I have indeed talked to Mandy. She was actually quite helpful in confirming something for me. She seems nice, but there are no romantic plans. Mandy is married and seems quite happy. She's been married for almost 2 decades. While her husband must be cool with it, I'm not the right guy for her. Last time I wrote, I ended up assuming that my brother had used my office computer to chat with Mandy. It was too late for me to contact him. I tend to get fixated on problems and work on solving them. This is great for my career, but in situations like this, I was just driving myself insane. So I decided to take a deep breath and leave. I decided to put everything else on hold and get back to the task at hand. First thing, I tried to contact everyone I'd invited to the wedding who I hadn't yet informed about the cancellation. As you may recall, I'd already informed my parents and had them contact my relatives on the day I made up my mind. However, only myself and Sarah have the complete guest list, so I needed to do the rest myself. Out of respect for my friends, I decided to call instead of text, but it might have been a bad idea since every phone call typically resulted in a rather lengthy explanation of why I was canceling the wedding. I know I could have given some other excuse, but I wanted people to know that I wasn't being frivolous or just experiencing something inane like cold feet. It was important not just for my own reputation, but I think in order to show respect to the people who had agreed to come on that day to support myself and Sarah as a couple. It wasn't until late into the evening when I finally managed to contact everyone, which meant it was now morning in Australia. I knew what I needed to do, but I wanted to make sure that I had everything in order, so I took a quick break and made a sandwich in the kitchen. I noticed that Sarah wasn't home. I had no idea when she left. I sat down to eat and think about what to do about my brother's situation. Let's call my brother Carl, for the sake of brevity, is now involved. Carl and I have always been close, despite him being 13 years older than me. He was this sort of quasi-parental figure in my life because by the time I became capable of having long-term memories, he was already well on his way to becoming an adult. He was always generous with his time, played with his little brother when other teenagers would probably have avoided such an activity like the plague, and generally seemed very mature and wise. To me, growing up, I respected him greatly. I was still coming to grips with the idea that he had been sexting with a girl who wasn't his wife in my house. I needed to decide what to do. Talking to him was obvious, but at this point, given how much of a shambles my relationship with Sarah was, I didn't know if I cared about having him confess just to clear my name. There might be something I could salvage, at least for my own sake and for the sake of propriety. I needed to yell at him about this and convince him to stop. However, I wasn't sure if I was going to rat him out or not. It all depended on what he told me and if I believed him or not. I finished my meal and logged into Facebook. I called Carl, who I knew worked mostly from home as a remote office worker since his field is related to it. He was always available during the day, and today was no exception. He didn't even ring more than once or twice before he answered. We greeted each other, exchanged some pleasantries, and then I just sort of dove into it. I asked him if he'd been using my computer to have sex chats with women on the internet when he was visiting me. Carl's face froze, and he leaned over out of the camera's frame. He was obviously closing his office door. Yeah, I did. Why did he say to me? I swore. I told Carl that Sarah thought his flirting was with me because he used my computer. I said I wasn't happy to take the blame for him and asked him point-blank if Karen knew. He stuttered for a few seconds and then looked a bit sheepish. He said that Karen didn't know and that he'd prefer it stayed that way. He went on to explain that their relationship had been rocky since their youngest was born 4 years ago, especially in the bedroom. Carl had always been private, especially when it came to intimate details. At least, that's how he was when talking to his younger brother. However, this time he just let it all out. Things had been bad. He was tired of getting rejected. Karen was always tired, no matter what he did or how much he helped around the house. Eventually, this led to problems on his side. He said he had performance anxiety on the few occasions when Karen was in the mood for some bedroom fun. Things just got worse from there. He said there was no amount of laundry, dishes, or time spent minding children that would get him in trouble. So, he started spending time in his office at night working. He even did the finger quotes when saying this. It turned into a pretty hardcore addiction to OnlyFans sites. Given the relative privacy he had in his office for legitimate work, it spiraled out of control pretty quickly. I asked him if he was still doing it, and he swore up and down that he wasn't. I thought I believed him when he said it. He seemed sincere, but I just had this feeling in the back of my mind that something was off. Maybe it was because of all the deceit I'd encountered recently, but I was doubting my own brother, he's always been a stand-up guy to me. I really hated being in this situation. The problem I faced was pretty complex. Here's what I had to do. If I wanted to clear my name, I would have to get my brother to tell Sarah that it was him all along. But if he did that, there was no guarantee that Sarah wouldn't spitefully inform Karen. I thought it would be best if Karen knew, but I didn't know if I felt comfortable. I was torn between dropping a bombshell on my brother's marriage and letting sleeping dogs lie. I didn't have an immediate answer, but I urged him to tell his wife and to seek marriage counseling. He mentioned that they'd been going for 6 months, and while it was helpful, what really helped him was getting a prescription for some generic Viagra. I actually did. He made a spit take, spraying water all over my computer screen. He told me that they had been trying to make sure they had intimate time at least a couple of times a week. The Viagra had cured him of his performance anxiety to the point where now they were both looking forward to spending time together after the kids went to bed. The general idea was that things were going in the right direction, so please don't mess it up. I really didn't want to be in this position, not just for Carl and Karen's sake but for my nieces as well. If Carl was telling me the truth, I could be messing up a relationship that was starting to mend. It was unpredictable what would happen, so I decided to wait and see. After all, I was going to meet him. In a couple of weeks, I'd get to meet him in person. Once I got him alone in a room and a few drinks into him, I'd definitely get to the bottom of this. It seemed like the best course of action. That night, I went to bed early. I didn't see Sarah until the next morning. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept well. I asked her where she'd been. After almost 6 years together, I was used to her being out a lot. She told me she'd gone to the courthouse to post bail for Evelyn and then driven her to her parents' house, where she'd spent the night. She made a point of telling me how horrible it was to have to explain to her parents that she'd called off the wedding. I asked her if her parents knew why, and she said, "Of course they do." I tried to remain calm, but I was losing it by this point in this ordeal. I bit back. "Are you going to move back there so that they have both girls at home now?" It was childish and petty, but the fact that she bailed Evelyn out of jail annoyed me to no end. You don't need to be an ass about this. And you don't need to be Evelyn's FC King underling. Her eyes started to tear up, and I took a deep breath. We just stood there, miles apart in the living room of our house, and didn't say anything for a good minute or two until Sarah decided to continue talking. Our parents are going to be here at 3. I actually wanted to tell her off for not consulting me on this, but I decided that was just my own ego talking. I did need to sit down with them, and we still had to work out the details around the wedding and whatever remaining deposit we had. I needed to at least once face-to-face explain to everyone why it wasn't happening. So let's do this and get it out of the way. I tried to make myself busy, but there isn't much you can do on a Sunday except waste time. And time wasting isn't very enjoyable when you know you are heading into the meat grinder in just a few hours. When 3 p.m. rolled around, so did our parents. We all sat down at the large kitchen table that Sarah had bought just a month after we closed on the house. It was secondhand from Facebook Marketplace, but she loved it because it was solid oak with a beautiful finish and capable of seating a lot of people. She always wanted to have big dinner parties with our families over, but not like this. The next 3 hours were rough. No one was happy, and that was okay. I guess the best support as I expected, my parents were the first to voice their opinion. Even so, they basically said, it's his decision to make. That means they think it's crazy too. But they're still backing him. I was fine with that. I didn't want my parents to be associated with canceling the wedding. We eventually worked out a fair deal. We would try to get back what we'd spent. We split the money however it was contributed and then ate whatever losses there were communally. When it came to the subject of the house, Sarah strongly objected to my idea of paying her or her parents back for the deposit. She didn't intend to move. As you might imagine, Sarah and I hadn't really talked about the SRS living together situation in too much detail. The fact that I even brought up settling the house equity seemed to shock her. I think she was shocked because it seemed like I was expecting her to move out of our home. She got pretty upset, and I can see why. I should have talked to her about our relationship status first before trying to negotiate a payment plan with her parents. It made it pretty clear to everyone how I felt about our relationship. I think our parents expected it or at least understood, but Sarah was really upset. She wasn't okay with us breaking up over this, and she made it clear. I made it clear that I wasn't moving out of my house and that we weren't breaking up. That was pretty much how my Sunday night ended after our parents left. Sarah and I tried to talk it out some more, but we kept going in circles. I had to rein in my natural inclination to run her down until we got a resolution. To be honest, I was pretty tired as well and just wanted to turn off my brain. Surprisingly, we ended up watching a movie together on the couch in silence until it was time to go to sleep. We said we'd talk about it more tomorrow and went to our separate rooms on Monday. I woke up to a large handwritten letter from Sarah that had been slid under the door. I took a quick look at the first few pages and decided I'd deal with it later and went to work. When I left, Sarah was still in bed. She must have been up late writing. Ira scheduled some meetings and started calling venues and vendors that were on my list. The results were mixed. The catering people were adamant that I pay most of their fees, claiming that they had ordered most of the food. I shot back at them, pointing out that they were expecting me to eat a week-old steak. My appeal fell on deaf ears. I tried talking to the woman who ran the catering business and explaining what happened, but she wasn't interested. It seemed to only make her more determined to get as much money as possible out of me. On the other hand, the DJ I hired for the entertainment was really kind and gave us almost all the money back. Things went like this. Between making calls and doing work, I read Sarah's letter. It's 20 pages long, so I'll just summarize it. Basically, Sarah said that she'd been bullied by Evelyn since childhood. In response, Sarah said she'd basically gone along with whatever Evelyn wanted to hear. She said it had become a general way of operating in her life. She was afraid to rock the boat or even voice an opinion. I reflected on this because, when I look back at our relationship with a critical eye, I kind of think Sarah was a bit too perfect. A girlfriend is someone who never disagrees with me, never chooses her own plans over mine, and never strongly opposes anything I want to do. She goes out of her way to make herself useful and basically acts like a yes woman in our relationship. We've never even had a minor disagreement in 6 years, let alone a full-blown argument. It sounds great from a relationship standpoint, but I couldn't shake this feeling that Sarah has some deep-seated insecurities and a need to make people happy. You know what they call people-pleasing behavior? When I start looking at it this way, a lot of things make sense to me. I start to realize that despite being with Sarah for 6 years, I don't actually know her that well. It's like she's put up this image around her, which is really just a mirror, a reflection of whatever she thinks people want to see. In our relationship, she's been acting like the perfect girlfriend while never really letting me in to see who she is as a person. I can't even say that what I saw in those text messages is the real Sarah because it's probably just another reflection of Evelyn and all her warts and faults. This may sound weird, but it's like we're in this unequal relationship. I don't know if this is just me, but I feel like our relationship is a bit one-sided. Maybe she loves me for who I am and how I wear my thoughts on my face and my heart on my sleeve, but I feel like I only love her for the mirror she is holding up to my face. I don't know if this sounds too metaphysical for you, but I'm still trying to figure it out. All I know is that in the last few days, I've probably learned more about Sarah than I had in the last 6 years. The letter she wrote me was the first real view into her childhood that I had. We talked more about this, specifically about her childhood, and the conclusion that we came to is that she needs help. She's a grown woman who is sadly stuck acting like a child, too scared to displease anyone lest she face her sister's wrath or her parents' disapproval. In the last few days, I've probably learned more about Sarah than I had in the last 6 years. The letter she wrote me was the first real view into her childhood that I had. We talked more about this, specifically about her childhood and her behavior. We came to the conclusion that she needs help. She's a grown woman who is sadly stuck acting like a child. She's too scared to displease anyone, lest she face her sister's wrath or her parents' disapproval. Val, or the loss of love from the one she loves. This is no way to have a relationship. I feel much more confident and assured that my decision to call off the wedding was the correct one. In fact, it could not be any more correct. After our talk, I went to bed with much less angst than I had in a few days. The story probably ends here since I couldn't find more. If you watched this long video, comment on Pepe.